Listen carefully, because what you are about to hear is not meant to comfort you. It is meant to wake you up. For decades, Sigmund Freud stood at the edge of a dangerous truth. A truth buried beneath layers of politeness, morality, and social expectation. He saw something most men never see, something society refuses to admit, that desire, especially female desire, is not what you've been told. You were taught a simple equation. Be kind, be loyal, be available, and in return you will be chosen. But reality does not follow this script. Reality plays by deeper, older rules, rules written not in words, but in instinct. Freud understood this. But even he hesitated to speak it plainly, because at the core of female desire lies something paradoxical, something that defies logic. It is not driven by comfort alone. It is not sustained by predictability. In fact, the very things men are told to provide, constant reassurance, emotional transparency, unwavering presence, can quietly suffocate attraction. Let that sink in. The hidden engine of desire is tension, not chaos, not cruelty, but tension, the subtle, unspoken uncertainty that keeps emotions alive. The space between knowing and not knowing. The feeling that something is just out of reach. This is where most men fail without ever realizing it. They believe that by giving more, they will receive more. More attention, more affection, more desire. So they become predictable, always available, always agreeable, always there, and in doing so, they remove the very element that fuels attraction, because desire does not thrive in certainty. It feeds on anticipation. Think about it. The moments that stay with you, the ones that linger in your mind, are never the ones fully explained. They are the ones that leave questions unanswered, the ones that make you wonder, that pull you back in, that refuse to give you closure. This is not manipulation. This is human nature, and here is where the silence of Sigmund Freud becomes deafening. He explored the unconscious mind, the hidden drives, the suppressed instincts. But when it came to female desire, he approached it with caution, because to reveal it fully would challenge the very foundation of how relationships are understood. Because if desire is not about fairness, then what is it about? It is about emotional intensity. It is about contrast. It is about the push and pull, the dynamic interplay between presence and absence, certainty and mystery, closeness and distance. And this is where the philosophy of Niccolò Machiavelli quietly enters the conversation. Machiavelli never spoke about love in the way poets do. He spoke about power, about influence, about understanding human behavior not as it should be, but as it is. An attraction, at its core, follows the same principle. People are not drawn to what is easily controlled. They are drawn to what they cannot fully predict. This is the hidden engine. The moment you become fully understood, fully predictable, fully safe, you may gain comfort, but you lose tension. And without tension, desire begins to fade, not because something is wrong, but because the emotional spark has nothing left to feed on. This does not mean becoming distant or cold. It means understanding balance, because too much distance creates disconnection, but too much availability creates indifference, and most men live at the extremes, never realizing that attraction lives in the middle, a place where you are present, but not predictable, where you are interested, but not consumed, where you are confident enough to walk away, even when you could stay. This is what creates emotional gravity. This is what makes someone lean in instead of pull away. And this is the part no one teaches you, because it contradicts the comforting narrative that effort alone is enough. Effort matters, but direction matters more. You can give everything to the wrong dynamic and still lose. You can say all the right words and still feel invisible, because desire is not a reward for effort. It is a response to emotional experience, and the emotional experience you create determines everything. If it is predictable, it fades. If it is intense, it stays. If it is balanced between certainty and mystery, it grows. Freud saw the patterns. He traced the origins of desire back to the unconscious, to the hidden forces shaping behavior beneath awareness, But even he knew that some truths are too disruptive to present without resistance. Because once you understand this, you can no longer pretend. You begin to see why the perfect man is often overlooked, why the one who tries the hardest is often replaced, why attraction can rise and fall without any logical explanation. It is not random, it is not unfair, it is simply governed by rules that are rarely spoken, but always felt. There is a quiet war happening inside every human being, a war between what they feel and what they are told they should feel, and nowhere is this conflict more intense than in the realm of desire. From the moment a person becomes aware of attraction, society begins its conditioning. It whispers rules, expectations, moral codes, carefully shaping what is acceptable and what must remain hidden. It tells women how they should love, who they should desire, and most importantly, what they should never admit. And over time, this conditioning becomes so powerful that it begins to mask the truth itself. Even Sigmund Freud understood that the human mind is divided. There is the conscious self, the version that follows rules, seeks approval, and maintains order. And beneath it, there is the unconscious, the raw, instinctive force that does not ask for permission. This is where desire lives, not in the polite conversations, not in the carefully chosen words, but in the silent reactions, the unexplained attraction, the pull that cannot be justified. And this is where the conflict begins, because what society rewards is not always what instinct chooses. A woman may say she wants stability, kindness, and emotional safety, and consciously she believes it. She has been taught to value these traits, to prioritize them, to see them as the foundation of a good relationship. But desire does not operate on instruction. It does not follow rules written by culture or reinforced by approval. It responds to emotional stimulation, to tension, to presence that disrupts the ordinary. This is the part that creates confusion, because what is expressed outwardly often does not match what is felt internally, and most men make the same mistake. They listen only to the words, ignoring the deeper signals. They try to become what they are told is right, instead of understanding what actually creates attraction, and in doing so, they unknowingly align themselves with comfort, while desire moves elsewhere. This is not deception. It is conditioning. When someone grows up in a world that judges certain desires as wrong, inappropriate, or unacceptable, they learn to suppress them. Even from themselves, they replace instinct with ideals, they replace feeling with logic, they replace truth with what is socially rewarded. But suppression does not eliminate desire, it only hides it. And hidden forces are always more powerful than visible ones, because they operate without resistance. This is why attraction can seem unpredictable, even contradictory, why someone can be drawn to a person who does not fit their stated preferences, why emotions can intensify in situations that make no logical sense, why the safe choice is often respected but not desired, because the unconscious does not negotiate, it acts, and when it acts, it bypasses every rule that was carefully constructed by society. This is the reality that made even Sigmund Freud cautious. To fully expose this dynamic would mean admitting that human behavior is not as rational, not as controlled, and not as morally consistent as people want to believe it. Would mean acknowledging that desire can contradict values, that attraction can ignore logic, that what people feel is not always aligned with what they think they should feel. And this is where the perspective of Niccolò Machiavelli becomes unsettlingly relevant. Machiavelli did not concern himself with ideals. He focused on reality, on how people actually behave when stripped of illusion. He understood that appearances are often maintained to preserve order, while true motives remain hidden beneath surface. And in the context of desire, this insight becomes undeniable, because attraction is rarely about what is socially approved. It is about what is emotionally compelling. It is about what breaks patterns, what creates intensity, what stands apart from the predictable rhythm of everyday interaction. And social conditioning works in the opposite direction. It encourages predictability. It rewards conformity. It promotes stability above all else. These are valuable traits for long-term structure, but they are not the spark that ignites desire. And when someone tries to build attraction purely on These traits, they often find themselves respected, appreciated, even trusted, but not desired, because desire is not built on what is safe. It is built on what is felt deeply, often without explanation. This is why the conflict never disappears on one side. There is the version of reality shaped by society, the one that values order, consistency, and approval. On the other side, there is the raw, unfiltered experience of attraction, the one that responds to emotion, tension, and unpredictability, and these two forces are constantly pulling in opposite directions, creating a gap between what is said and what is experienced, a gap that most people never learn to see. But once you see it, everything changes. You stop taking words at face value. You start paying attention to behavior, patterns, to emotional reactions. You begin to understand that attraction is not communicated directly. It is revealed indirectly through attention, through energy, through the subtle shifts in presence that cannot be faked. And suddenly, the confusion begins to dissolve, because what once seemed inconsistent now follows a pattern shaped not by rules, but by instinct, and instinct will always find a way to express itself, no matter how deeply it is buried, no matter how strongly it is denied, no matter how carefully it is hidden behind the mask of social conditioning. There is a force more powerful than logic, more persuasive than words, and far more dangerous than most people realize. It cannot be seen directly. It cannot be measured. And yet it dictates who is desired, who is forgotten, and who is impossible to replace. This force is emotional tension, and if you fail to understand it, nothing else you do will matter. You can say the right things, you can behave the right way, you can give everything you have and still feel invisible, because attraction is not created through comfort alone. It is created through contrast. Even Sigmund Freud understood that human emotion is driven by opposing forces: pleasure and pain, desire and resistance, presence and absence. It is this friction, this subtle conflict, that creates intensity. Without it, everything becomes flat, predictable, forgettable. And this is exactly where most men fail. They believe that attraction grows through consistency alone. So they become steady, reliable, always available. They remove uncertainty, eliminate risk, and present themselves as completely safe. But in doing so, they eliminate tension, and without tension, there is nothing left to feel, because emotional tension is not about chaos or manipulation. It is about creating a dynamic experience, a rhythm, a push and pull, the feeling that something is unfolding rather than being handed over all at once. Think about the moments in your life that carried the most emotional weight. They were never the ones where everything was certain. They were the ones filled with anticipation, the ones where you didn't know exactly what would happen next, the ones where every small interaction carried meaning, the ones that kept your mind engaged long after they ended. That is tension, and it is addictive, because the human mind is wired to seek resolution when something is unclear, unfinished, or just out of reach. It demands attention. It pulls you back in again and again. This is why unpredictability is so powerful. Not recklessness, not instability, but controlled unpredictability. The ability to break patterns just enough to create curiosity, because when everything is known, nothing is felt deeply, and when nothing is felt deeply, desire fades. This is the hidden mechanism that operates beneath every interaction, the reason why someone who is not always available can feel more attractive than someone who is constantly present, the reason why mystery can hold more power than full transparency, the reason why emotional highs and lows, when balanced correctly, create stronger attachment than steady neutrality. It is not about playing games. It is about understanding how emotion works, and emotion thrives on movement, not stillness. This is where the thinking of Niccolò Machiavelli becomes unexpectedly relevant, because Machiavelli understood that influence is not maintained through constant reassurance. It is maintained through control of perception, through timing, through knowing when to step forward and when to step back. And in realm of attraction, this translates into emotional pacing. If you give everything at once, there is nothing left to discover. If you reveal every thought, every feeling, every intention, you remove the unknown, and once the unknown disappears, so does the tension. But when there is a balance, when presence is followed by absence, when clarity is mixed with mystery, something begins to build: curiosity, engagement, desire. Because the mind begins to fill in the gaps, it starts asking questions, it starts seeking answers, it becomes invested in the outcome, and this investment is what creates emotional depth. Without tension, there is no investment, only passive interaction, something easily replaced, easily forgotten. And this is why being too easy to understand can become a silent disadvantage, not because honesty is wrong, not because openness is weak, but because when everything is immediately clear, there is no journey, no process, no emotional build-up, and without that build-up, there is no intensity, no reason for the mind to stay engaged, no reason for desire to grow. Freud recognized that much of human behavior is driven by unresolved tension, by desires that are not fully satisfied, by emotions that are not completely expressed. It is this incompleteness that keeps people thinking, feeling, returning, and when everything is resolved quickly, the emotional cycle ends before it has a chance to deepen. This is why the strongest attractions are rarely calm at the beginning. They are charged, dynamic, filled with moments of uncertainty and clarity, closeness and distance, not extremes, but variation, because variation creates stimulation, and stimulation creates memory, and memory is what keeps someone thinking about you when you are not there. This is the power most people never learn to use. They chase approval. Instead of creating experience, they seek validation. Instead of building emotional impact, they focus on being liked. Instead of being felt, but being liked is replaceable. Being felt is not because emotions leave traces, they linger, they echo, they create a presence that remains even in absence, and that presence is built through tension, through the careful balance of giving and holding back, of revealing and concealing, of being present without becoming predictable. Because the moment you become predictable, you become optional, and the moment you become optional, desire begins to look elsewhere, not out of malice, not out of intention, but because the emotional experience has lost its depth, lost its movement, lost the very thing that made it alive. And once that happens, no amount of effort can recreate what tension once built naturally.